This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun being Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Bringing us in on a Friday morning, July 22nd. Texting with Eric last night, and starts us right off on what we're going to get into today. We're remembering Gamecock quarterback Phil Petty passed away at the age of 43. The news coming out yesterday, and saw a lot of social media reaction yesterday for sure from both fans, former players, former coaches, all across the board. So we will try to do our best to remember Phil Petty and honor his life, and especially what he meant to Gamecock football, helping the turnaround from 0-11, 21 straight losses to 2 straight Outback Bowl wins, and being a lot of your first real Gamecock quarterback that you remember. Saw that was a common theme yesterday on social media. So we'll get to a bunch of that as a lot of you are up and joining the show already. DC and KC, RL, and Anthony on the YouTube live stream. Roger mentioning good morning with a heavy heart today. And wanted to show you some of the social media reaction as we begin. Gamecock football put up an impressive picture, or an impressive graphic, I guess, to kind of to break the news really publicly yesterday. And then the reaction came from there for sure. But Phil Petty, number 14 for Carolina in those Lou Holtz Russell uniforms. The graphic here is, and the Gamecock football Twitter account just saying our hearts are heavy as we mourn the loss of a great Gamecock. Shane Beamer also tweeting out his thoughts yesterday. So sorry to hear the news of Gamecock football great Phil Petty passing away. Thoughts and prayers to his family. Ryan Brewer posting the picture of Phil Petty holding up the United States of America flag in the pregame ceremony at Mississippi State, where the Gamecocks were the first sports team to fly after 9/11. And Phil Petty featured prominently there right before the game. It's an iconic picture. When I think of Phil Petty, that's the first one that comes to mind. And I know Ryan and Phil were close. Ryan tweeting out, our teammate, quarterback, leader, inspiration, and brother, love you more than you know, will miss you dearly. Popped up another picture of he and Phil more recently. Looks like at a Gamecock tailgate. And friend of the show there, you just saw in the intro, Eric Kemry, one of our first guests, former Gamecock assistant, and was Phil Petty's backup quarterback. I texted with Eric last night. He's on the football field over in Chattanooga right now, coaching the Baylor school in preseason practice, and admitted even if he was not, he's just not ready to talk about it right now. And I completely understand that, those who are close to Phil Petty and how raw it is, and want to respect that for sure. That's why we'll read Eric's series of 5 tweets here. I think is a proper way to start remembering Phil Petty today. Phil Petty will be missed, Eric Kemry says. He was a competitor and leader, intelligent, thoughtful, gritty as heck, and our QB1. Though he is no longer here, his spirit lives. His legacy will remain steadfast at the University of South Carolina. Second tweet from Eric Kemry. Phil took the beating of a 21-game losing streak, got off the ground, wiped the mud off his hands and the grass out of his face mask, and led us to the 2 most successful seasons in school history at that time. If anyone has embodied the spirit of a Gamecock, it was him. Phil Petty beat Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State twice. He loved football and had a great understanding of the game. He made everyone in the huddle believe we could win. He made us all better. Most importantly, Phil was a husband and a father and a loving son. He was kind to strangers and loved talking ball with Gamecock fans. He was so proud of his kids, sending us videos of his son throwing a ball an awful lot like his dad. For us that got the privilege to play with him, he was our brother. We shared a brotherhood that never went away and never will. Love you, 14, Eric Kemry concludes. I'll always be your backup, forever to thee. And Phil Petty actually was returning to Columbia this year to be an assistant coach, co-offensive coordinator at Gray Collegiate Athletics. Had gotten into coaching after a year of trying to make it in the NFL and went with Skip Holtz to East Carolina. And then his coaching career took a break after Holtz split with East Carolina, and now he was getting back into high school football coaching this year. My personal memory of Phil Petty, he's a year younger than me. I transferred into the University of South Carolina my sophomore year, his redshirt freshman year, and I had no clue. Being from North Carolina, my dad had gone to South Carolina, so I'd always gone down to football games. Went to basketball camp and baseball camp. But from a student life perspective, I didn't know anything about attending the University of South Carolina. So they asked me where I want to live. I'm like, oh, live in the Roost. That's where the athletes live. That's got to be the best place to live. So that's where I was my first year. Phil Petty was there as well. Got in an elevator one time. And in comes Phil Petty, who I certainly knew who it was. He had a solid reputation. Me being a sports nerd, I knew who the quarterback was, or who one of the quarterbacks on the roster was. Anthony Wright was the guy on campus at the time, and Phil Petty was a redshirt freshman. But he got in. He had a pizza, and I as I remember it. Remember him saying that this is all for me and trying to gain some weight, where he was as a redshirt freshman. But overall, Phil Petty to me embodies a steady quarterback who everyone looks to as a leader and a guy who stepped up time and time again. The prevailing memory yesterday was Alabama touchdown late to Rodney Trafford over the middle, 2001, to win that game 37-36. On the road a couple of weeks before that at Georgia, throws it up. Brian Scott makes the catch for the Gamecocks to win that one 14-9. More of you guys weighing in on this thing. Tonester says, sad day for all Gamecocks. Justin Adams weighing in, was at the New Mexico State game as a 12-year-old back in 2000. My mom got a number 14 jersey right after. That was the game that broke the 21-game losing streak. Jason and Craig, we see you guys weighing in as well. If you have specific memories of Phil Petty, would love to hear them this morning. And tough news, at 43 years old, I saw Corey Jenkins, who played with Phil just that last season in 2001, talking to WLTX yesterday and struggled to get through it. Just talking about how tomorrow is not guaranteed for any of us. We don't know our time. It's important to take advantage of our time here and not take it for granted. The Trier head coach now in Corey Jenkins, former Gamecock, and he put out on Twitter, "This one hurts. I will truly miss you, brother. Learned a hell of a lot from you in our days as Gamecock QBs. Our quarterback room was always fun, man. Rest easy, Phil P." With the hashtag RIP Phil Petty, brothers for life, and quarterback, and put the picture up of Phil Petty in the Garnet 14, the white helmet with the Love You Brother and RIP 14. A couple of other Gamecock teammates, offensive lineman John Strickland on Twitter with a couple of pictures, one of Phil Petty throwing the ball in that same Garnet uniform, another one of these two guys years later. Candid picture. Phil, it's been a tough morning to say the least. We have lost a great friend, brother, and teammate way too soon. I'm crushed and at a loss for words. I will always cherish the great memories we shared together at South Carolina and all the good times we've had since. After football, life after football, you will be deeply missed, my brother. RIP number 14. That's from John Strickland, former offensive lineman. Philip Jones was the center for Phil Petty for most, if not all, those years on the Gamecock offensive line. He tweeted out a picture of a pre-snap with Phil right behind him saying, "Heartbroken, love you, my QB1, Phil Petty." Philip Jones, now a high school football coach as well. So just some of the reaction coming in about Phil Petty passing away at the age of 43. And tough news for a lot of Gamecock fans to process yesterday for sure. Craig says, I'm sure the team will have number 14 on their helmets or jerseys this year. Nothing announced from the University of South Carolina, but certainly would not be surprised if something like that does happen. But a top 10 is Phil Petty. If you're a numbers person, talking about quarterbacks and yards, I think passing yards, I'm pretty sure career touchdown passes as well. A guy, again, who's just steady. And if you never saw him play, it's maybe even tough to describe. Like, not necessarily a guy who was known for a big arm or extremely accurate or extremely mobile, but really, really good at all of those things, right? Still good arm strength, still could make people miss every now and again enough. And maybe it's Jonathan Alston, I think, another former Gamecock teammate who I saw from our buddy Scott Eisberg, WCIV down in Charleston, talking to. And just, I think he was the one who mentioned just whatever he was asked to do, that's what he did. And it was a lot of run first, Lou Holtz offense back in the day. And Jonathan Alston mentioned that you never heard him complain and how important or how much he was respected that all these years later now, just being out in the business world and seeing how important that trait is to do your job and do it with a good attitude as a quarterback in an SEC school, especially to do it as a really good leader. And that's how I will remember Phil Petty. I think that's how a lot of Gamecock fans will remember number 14, Phil Petty, who has left us at the age of 43. So I thought it only appropriate to start the show that way. Again, if you have any specific memories or ways that you would like to remember a Gamecock quarterback, feel free to weigh in on the live stream here. Live comments from YouTube and Facebook pop right into the show, right to me, and I can pop them right in. If you hit us up on Twitter, I can see that and get it in. It's a little bit clunkier that way at Tim Hill UFA. You can always hit us up. Again, more than that one line from Eric Kemry today in 2022, and this will probably transition us to wrapping up SEC Media Days yesterday. But I got to read it again. I got to look at my notes just to make sure my brain will read the sentence out loud. Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State. Wins against those schools in the same year in 2001. Just in 1 year. Go back and double check that. But the fact that he did that, and Eric pointed out twice against Ohio State, but that was the same year. Going back in, so it was a 9-3 season where the only losses were Florida, Tennessee, and Arkansas for the Gamecocks. In the same year, South Carolina football with Phil Petty running the show beat Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State, which is what has become the college football playoff, right? It's even more impressive now, 21 years later, that was part of the big time turnaround. And it wasn't just going from a team that lost mostly to a team that won. It was 21 games in a row on the losing side of things, and then having a program that could beat Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State in the same year. So when Shane Beamer does talk about doing something at South Carolina and how it can be done, and it has been done to a certain extent before, point back to 2001 if you're talking to someone who's uninitiated, and Phil Petty leading the Gamecocks to those wins against those four iconic programs who've dominated college football now the last several years. Nick weighing in this morning. He was my first glimmer of hope as a young Gamecock fan, talking about Phil Petty. I was barely old enough to remember the Tannehill days, but will always remember being in the stands for New Mexico State and Georgia the next week. Thanks, Nick, for contributing that to the program. The show is always better. You always make the show better when you contribute, especially at a time like this where I feel so inadequate, even having watched all of Phil Petty's career, even having been there in the stands for those first 2 years, that 21-game losing streak, and having gone to both of those Outback Bowls where South Carolina beats Ohio State. I didn't really know him. And I was texting with Eric Kimmery last night because I was telling him I want to allow, if those who did know him, the opportunity to talk about him and to maybe help their process along, but I also want to be respectful of their privacy and not be invasive there. And then from the fan standpoint, for those of you like Teddy, who says, my wife and I started dating in 1999. We were engaged and married in 2000, newlyweds in 2001, going to all the home games those years. Those were special years. We are deeply saddened for his passing. Roger, living in the upstate, I remember Phil Petty from probably his sophomore year at Boiling Springs High School when he was a starter there. He grew up a huge Gamecock fan. Brad Scott didn't have to sell much. Yeah, I saw Brad Scott also weighing in on an article from the state newspaper, I think, yesterday, just mentioning a good player and also a better person. I think Skip Holtz put something out on social media yesterday saying gone way too soon. So want to be respectful of those who were close to Phil Petty, but also honor his memory for Gamecock fans as well, and appreciate you helping to do that with your personal memories and perspectives on Phil Petty. Craig says, I've said it before, our son was born about an hour after we kicked a winning field goal to beat Ohio State. New Year's Day 2002, a special time in my life for sure. Daniel Weaver reference. Roger saying, he and Tommy Suggs mean more to me than the other Gamecock quarterbacks because they are from our state. I will remember how he carried himself well. Craig saying he had the game on in the hospital room right before his son was being born. Wow. Strong memories there, and appreciate you guys weighing in on the program. I mentioned, again, that is a sentence that is hard for me to get out. Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. all Gamecock victories in 2001. SEC Media Days wrapping up in Atlanta yesterday with what I thought on paper was the most dramatic day for sure. And then it didn't turn out to grab a bunch of national headlines or anything like that, but I think it lived up to the billing, and I was fascinated watching Bryan Harsin from Auburn. He went right on in with the controversy. I don't know what you call it exactly. I think he called it an inquiry that happened back in February where there was some complaining with Auburn outgoing transferring players that I guess the complaints were that Bryan Harsin was being disrespectful or working them too hard, or I forget what it was exactly. Basically, not running the program how it should be run. And as Harsin put it yesterday, they're just personal attacks. And the pitch that he gave, I thought, was a really fascinating one for multiple reasons, but the fact that he says his team has gotten a lot better. It was a test, and now Auburn is stronger. His football players, his coaches, his entire program now much more together than what happened last year. Well, now you got to back it up in a big way. But I mentioned it yesterday. Like, what do you say when you're Bryan Harsin firmly on the hot seat? And he came in from the outside, a good reputation at Boise State, but as Boise State, you're 1 year at Arkansas State before then. And Auburn, infamous for having short leashes with their coaches, a short fuse for sure. You go 6-7 in year number one, including a loss at South Carolina, the first-year head coach. When you took their offensive coordinator from him, it was an embarrassing season in a lot of ways. Greg McElroy pointed out on the SEC Network broadcast that actually they were close. Auburn was pretty close and competitive, and actually even had Alabama on the ropes there in the Iron Bowl. And so they're not that far away. And we can overhype things. We all know Tank Bigsby, heck of a running back. I enjoyed what he had to say yesterday as well. Confident without being cocky, and kind of reinforcing that mindset or that mantra that Auburn is closer now. They're better off for it. They're going to be stronger for it. We'll see, right? We'll see. I mean, it is all talk right now. Nick says, I have nothing but respect for Harsin calling out both media and message board warriors for targeting his family. Even the mafia doesn't go after wife and kids. I earned respect for how he did it, and because it's a tough spot, right? First of all, you have to, from a PR standpoint, the smart way to do it is to do it head on. And the only thing I would have preferred was him not dropping the line of, this is the one time I'm going to address it and I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Like, to me, that I understand why you do that, but I don't think you have to do that there. I've been in so many press conferences where that has been said, and then several times that's been ignored, right? Like, you can tell us you're not going to talk about it anymore, but if you also, in that explanation, you're incomplete, like, it's the job of media nerds to still ask those questions, even though they anticipate they're not going to get a favorable response. So Harsin gave a complete perspective, and I don't think he left anything out, and I think it would have been pretty clear to everyone in that room that they weren't going to get much more out of him if they were going to probe that situation. But I can understand you want to be pretty clear, and you don't want to harp on it in the whole thing. And I thought it was pretty impressive way to handle it. But again, Harson's in a tough spot, man. And you have to be strong in your preseason messaging, no matter where you are in the SEC, especially when you're at Auburn, but now especially when you've gone through what they went through back in spring or pre-spring ball. And Harsin had the first year he had and is in the position he's in headed into year number 2. So that was, to me, the most fascinating thing that happened at SEC Media Days at large. Then you get the other side of it with Jimbo Fisher having to tap dance around all the questions, which there were a lot of. And I thought it was fascinating that Paul Feinbaum pointed out, yeah, Nick Saban was never really asked about that whole situation, but the first 4 questions you got were all about this. And Jimbo Fisher was like, yeah, they're all from Alabama people, about the Nick Saban spat. And hilarious that Jimbo's spin on it was, yeah, it's too bad it had to happen publicly. But it happened publicly, and this is the way we were raised in West Virginia. We just, if you have a problem with somebody, you just say it, you get it out, you move on, and the whole thing. Plenty of respect for Nick. Plenty of respect for a guy that you basically said he thought he was God. Go looking at what he's done. Whew, okay. And too bad it went public, your public press conference that you made public and took it to the next level. Now, maybe if you want to say too bad Nick Saban had to say those things publicly and I felt I had to defend my program publicly, that's a little different. But, man, I don't think anybody's buying it that Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher are good now, and that was just how things are done in West Virginia. Get out of here, man. And now Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M are going to have to back it up in a big way. I don't think 4-4 in the SEC is going to cut it again for Texas A&M fans to continue to be on the Jimbo train, especially after number 1 recruiting class in, and knowing that they've given him a national championship trophy with the year to fill in the expectation there. So you had that. You had Josh Heupel. It was Josh Heupel, right? Riding the wave of a tremendous first year. The offensive numbers just every time I see them again and again, just so impressive for Tennessee. He says he had guys step up last year, Hendon Hooker being number 1, big-time wide receiver being number 2. And now he's got more guys waiting to do it or poised to do that and help Tennessee continue to get better and improve on even 7-6, even after all they had lost going in. And he called his team the thinnest team in America from a roster standpoint last year. This year, not. But the expectations just massive for Tennessee this year. And I expect them to be number 2 in today's preseason SEC media poll. We'll see. Where will the Gamecocks be picked? Talked a little bit about that yesterday. We'll continue to discuss that, but need to bring in our first guest of the program here in just a second. First, wanted to get a couple of comments from you. Craig says, listening to Jimbo's like when you're listening to a podcast, accidentally hit the 1.5 speed by accident. Can you imagine him on speed? Yeah, I mentioned that exact thing yesterday, Craig. I think it's a 2 times instead of a 1.5. Jimbo is a fast-talking huckster. I mean, the fact that he was actually asked about that and talked about that a couple of times was interesting. He's like, yeah, I'm just trying to get you in and out, trying to get you all the information. And sometimes when you're coaching, you don't have that much time to get in everything you want to get in and the NCAA restrictions, and you got to talk fast and the whole thing. Good point, Nick. I'm just waiting for the Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly movie that parodies the whole Saban-Jimbo rivalry. Who wouldn't want Step Brothers set in the college football world? Good point. I wonder, Stuart Lake, you a Step Brothers guy? Are you a, what is that? I forget the international deal.
Yeah, Prestige Worldwide.
There we go. You are a member of Prestige Worldwide. Fantastic. I figured you'd be in on that. Well done. Former Gamecock assistant coach Stuart Lake coming in on fire. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, too. Good to be back here a little bit and listening to you. Yeah, Jim, it sounds like, you always like to pick on me, but at least in wrestling, we know they're fake when they're making idiots of themselves. That's what college football is not, and you just feel bad for them at the end of the day.
No doubt, man. I love the idea that these things are like storyboarded out in wrestling. You know, they figure out, all right, here we're going to take it to the next level, and then they're back in the locker room figuring out exactly, all right, I'm going to say this, then you say that. They're the best at it, man. They're the best. I love it. You're right. I shouldn't make fun of you too much. I should make fun of you more for wearing the Cleveland Browns hat than your affinity for wrestling. But I admire the loyalty too much.
Well, that's what, you and I were talking, and you said, what can we talk about? I wanted to remind you the NFL season here about to kick off. I think I was looking around July 30th is when they start full contact. Scrimmages will be going and preseason games, and hopefully we'll have a quarterback and get ready to roll.
Yeah, and still no official word on Deshaun Watson. I'm seeing he's trending on Twitter here. It's impossible to keep up with all this mess. I'm just waiting. I'm at the point where I'm sick of reading about it. I like the Pro Football Talk article from 10 hours ago. Will Judge Sue Robinson issue her decision on Friday afternoon? What do you you've always said half the season, right? I think that's what most people are anticipating. 8 games suspension. That's still kind of your feel.
It is for me. I don't know any more than you do, but it seems like he was suspended all last year, in my opinion. So, I mean, it's not like they just kind of let him go all last season and now we got to do it. So you kind of got to think maybe you go back a little bit, the old time served. And I saw where the Texans settled up with everything they were involved in. So at some point, you would assume, closure on it, and just kind of keeping up with who the Browns would have. I thought it would be Garoppolo, but read yesterday they've moved on from that thought of bringing him over. So I don't know. We may just have to run the Wildcat with Nick Chubb back there the old time. We'll figure it out.
You got Jacoby Brissett, and who else did I see they were working out the other day and going to bring in a couple of old guys? It was the old Alabama quarterback, A.J. McCarron, but it was somebody else who I thought they were bringing in. You remember who it was? You know who?
I did too, and I'm trying to think. It was the guy that was the first round pick a few years ago.
From out west. Oh, start yelling now. Start yelling. Get Josh Rosen. There we
go.
We talked it out. Nice work, Stuart. Yeah, you're down to Josh Rosen at quarterback. Good luck, sir.
Yeah, well, we're just trying to. Again, I think we just get someone who can hand it off to the running backs.
Is there any kind of college baseball version of Jimbo versus Saban? Is there anything that I know there's nothing publicly, and we obviously saw the Ray Tanner and Jack Leggett issue with the hot bats and the whole thing, and that's the only thing that pops to mind of coaches getting after each other publicly to any degree. Anything that was kind of simmering underneath the surface that you witnessed in your career?
Not really. I'd have to really think. Nothing compares to what you see with Jimbo Fisher and calling public-private press conferences, as you were saying. That's crazy to me. But now with the way it's changing, I assume you saw yesterday, the NCAA is probably going to pass here very soon. You can transfer multiple times, where you were thinking that first time was going to be enough. But yesterday they took the recommendation of the committee that student athletes should get to transfer more than once.
Well, here's how I understand that. Let's talk about this, because this is a massive issue, right?
Yeah.
This would completely change the complexion of college sports, even more so, right? It's already been changed. First of all, you get a one-time free pass with the portal. That was the first step. Now you add in name, image, and likeness, where you're not supposed to have pay for play, but you have no rules to prevent it.
Nope.
So, and now you got guys like Kirby Smart going out and bragging how much his guys are making. Yeah, we got the most highly paid defensive lineman, defensive back, the whole thing. As a college football fan, I love to hear that. Thank God you're finally saying it out loud, because you know they've been bragging about it forever behind closed doors, and we all know it's happened. But to have this next step, basically every player would be an unrestricted free agent every single year. To me, that steps over the line. And how I understand it, Stuart, is that this was a recommendation from a player-led committee to the next step in the NCAA, which I guess is a council. And now it will have to be voted on before it becomes a rule. So I understand completely why athletes would say, hey, we would prefer to not have any restrictions transferring. I think we all understand that, right? If you're pushing on the freedom of players and power of players side, you would absolutely push for it. Do you really think this is going to go through, I guess, is my first question. And then are you for it? It sounds like I don't know any coach who would be for it. And from a fan standpoint, I'm not for that either, even though I've been for everything that has happened to this point.
Yeah. Well, talking to a bunch of people yesterday in athletics, not just baseball, they think it's a done deal. Honestly, it's a question of when. It's not a question of if anymore. They think that probably this rule would go in effect starting next year. So for right now, we still go with the one transfer, then starting next summer, probably June 1st. But the kicker for baseball, that baseball people complain, baseball's never been separated. Like football gets to be its own thing, baseball kind of gets lumped in with just Olympic sports or however they want to call them. So as of right now, the portal ended last day of June. So July 1st, you knew who was staying, who was going. But July 1st, you also had to renew scholarships. Well, now the talk is you could transfer all the way up to the end of July, but they're still talking about making you renew contracts July 1st. Well, that's not even a business plan that makes any sense. That would be like, you've got to pay your employees. Hey, we don't know who your employees may be or how many you may have, but we want you to sign a contract with them. So there's going to have to be some negotiation in a sense of pushed back for coaches that, hey, August 1st now is when you got to sign a kids thing. But Tim, I don't know. I have nothing against people being able. I transferred. I mean, I went to a Division II school. Thank goodness I was able. I went to a junior college, then I went to Charleston Southern in my career. So I went to 3 schools in my career. So I'm certainly not one here to say, oh, these people are transferring too much. Reasons lead to it. But now I just look at rosters, and I've started to look at them for the fall on, colleges, and it's just going to be so awkward. You're going to have at least 50% of your team in their first year and possible last year at the same time. There's going to be some weird locker rooms, and it's, to me, football's different. I mean, football's always been a mercenary type sport anyway. Let's pay to get the best guys. They've been giving out gold Trans Ams for 50 years, right? So, I mean, it's not like we're all shocked that someone's getting paid, but baseball had been different in a sense that you develop guys. And so I don't know, as far as being a baseball person, it's really, I told someone yesterday, I couldn't have imagined even 5 years ago where we were going to be today. And with the talk now of unlimited transfers and guys getting paid more than coaches to play at college and scouts with the draft going on, it was so weird listening to scouts. I mean, they're actually battling financially the school. It had always been pro baseball provided the opportunity to play pro baseball. And the money's here and there where, a Tucker Tolman may be getting millions where, Josiah Seidler, maybe he's getting $150,000 or whatever he gets. But now you have to take into consideration how much is the school paying you. And there's some guys in the SEC that I'm hearing are making $100,000 to $200,000 to play next season. So it's just kind of crazy to even think of.
No doubt about it. The idea, Nick put it up on the YouTube live stream, who's going to be the first player to have 3 national championships with 3 different teams.
Yeah.
It's going to happen if it's unlimited. I do like the idea. I know in this rule, you can only do it if you meet certain academic criteria. And I think what we've all been needing, what is clear that is needed in a transfer portal world are these windows, these defined windows that are more defined than what we have now and can kind of just put up some guardrails out there. So I do like that. To me, would those academic restrictions really do what they're supposed to do? You always have the rule in the way it's written, and then I like to talk to people who are actually in it and to see if the spirit of the rule is also being followed, or it just reads one way publicly and then it is handled a completely different way privately. Like my fear would be, then then guys aren't going to be engineering majors anymore if they're thinking about transferring, because they might not meet that academic criteria, and they're going to take the easiest classes possible, and then that's not doing anybody any good.
No, and guys, such a weird time too. I mean, like with my son being a senior, I hear kids are going into college already with 12, 15. Gosh, I was joking with Coach Tanner. One of his kids is going into college with like 30 hours already.
That's awesome. They're saving a bunch of money that way. Do it.
Oh, yeah. And then you start to wonder, well, what are they even taking? Are they all going to have master's degrees when all these years are over? You know, there's still COVID kids playing. They're going to be like 24. And I had no problem with staying in college for 5 years myself. But at some point, you just wonder, does the academic part just become obsolete? I mean, it's, you know, especially when I think of college football, we've all thought there'd be some kind of minor league system for years. Well, now there is. Now you can just be up front that, hey, we want Tim Hill. Instead of him maybe, you know, can't play in the NFL at 19. They know that physically. So we're going to pay him a couple of years and relax. And that's when I don't know. It's kind of, I can sit back a little bit right now and just watch, because it's changing so fast. I don't know where we've gone far enough, where it goes. I mean, I was just talking to someone yesterday, and they were asking about getting a year back because of some situations. I said, at this time, all I'd do is file a waiver. I can't imagine the NCAA is turning anything down right now that a student athlete, because it was a good reason anyway, wanted. And you're going to start seeing in college baseball a lot of postgraduate schools coming up. Like we used to hear with basketball, when they would be going to a school after high school for 1 year to kind of still not start their clock, being a postgraduate, because we've seen it firsthand this summer. Nobody's recruiting high school baseball players really right now, except maybe for pitchers, because you've got thousands of kids on the transfer portal that you can go look at their stats. You can go look at video. You know, they face college pitching. So the 9th grade phenom that committed 5 years ago, that's going to become obsolete. There's no need to commit a kid that young anyway. It wasn't back then either. But even now, when you can go get a 20-year-old or 21-year-old to come transfer, or as it looks like, just wait and get the team, the tournament teams or all tournament teams, and go pluck them from the Southern Conference or whoever. That's kind of what's the SEC and ACC have been able to do.
To do it once is one thing, but then just to do it year after year, and the idea of somebody doing it 4 times, playing 4 different years of 4 different schools is an overcorrection in my mind, because you mentioned some good things, right? The 9th grader committing is ridiculous and always has been. The minor league baseball payment system has been ridiculous forever, and it has been called out, and even there's still in denial. And Rob Manfred is challenging. The other day, somebody said you got to pay him a livable wage. He's like, I would challenge that. And I saw somebody put on social media, I got paid $11,000 last year to play in the minor leagues. I mean, come on, man. So I like the fact that we're moving those things in the positive direction. Now where we're overcorrecting is anybody can go anywhere, any year, and that's just what it is. That to me seems a little bit way over the line, and you got to find some kind of sweet spot here, don't you think?
I think so. I mean, I look at it now, there's still 2,000 kids in the baseball transfer portal. It's almost into July. So what's also happened is we just have created a mindset that if I go in this portal, then everything's going to happen my way. Well, now you got guys with nowhere to play because they put themselves out there. Again, July 1st, coaches had to write their contracts, their scholarships. So now that kid at school, XYZ's calling that coach back going, hey, Tim, Coach Hill, I want to come back. Well, I don't have any money left. You told me you were leaving. You were adamant you were transferring. I signed another guy. I mean, I don't have your scholarship anymore. And it's just a lot of people that's scary for me that got misinformation or somebody boosted their ego so much that they left a great opportunity looking for an even greater one. Now they don't have any. So it's going to be this next few weeks in college baseball is like scramble. All these kids trying to get back. I was talking to 3 junior college coaches this week as we were in another baseball tournament, and they're like, we'd have never thought so many people would be calling us. You know, transfers from Notre Dame and from all these big schools are calling, you know, you're run-of-the-mill, just that average JUCO team said, I need a place to play. Do you have a place? And that's what they were saying. Like, it's so weird. You know, guys already been in college a year, wanting to come back to trying to figure out, do we even offer any classes? Because you, as we said, you left high school with, 18 hours. You went to, last year took 30. Now you're at 48. The NCAA says you got to, he said it's a scramble. So, it's going to sort itself out, but we can't just keep saying, yeah, do that. Yeah, you can have that. At some point, someone in the room's got to be the adult and say, okay, this is college. This is what we were trying to do the whole time. And I just don't know if there's an adult in the room right now. I think everybody's afraid to speak up that they may be taken out of the room and replaced with someone else at these colleges. So it's crazy to me.
You can't offend anybody these days, Stuart. You can't do that and feel good about your job for sure. One point of clarification. You mentioned prep schools is what I'm going to call them. Those schools that have always been a thing in basketball, specifically in football. We've seen it. We've seen it in the state of South Carolina. These schools pop up for sure. Why baseball? Because I always thought that was the role of JUCOs. But it's the clock. Is that the
clock? Okay. Yeah, this is new to baseball, but what it allows now is, again, there just aren't spots anymore because all those 4-year guys are falling back into junior college too and have taken away a lot of it. But it's also a spot where, that kid that wasn't ready or maybe just wanted to hold off on starting his clock, he can get in a great environment to play games, practice, get better. Scouts can still watch you. You're still draft eligible in that year. So, I think it's something that's about to explode in college baseball because you can just get these teams together. They can, obviously online type academics, so you can continue to build hours for when you do go to college. And if it's economically feasible for you to do that prep year, then it's probably going to be cheaper than being in college. So I think it's a big thing in college baseball.
And when we say start the clock, you get 5 years to play 4, or you always have without the COVID stipulation here recently. And so if you go to prep school, that 5-year clock doesn't start until you enroll in college is the kind of deal. And as you were talking about that, Stuart, that nightmare scenario that ESPN went through last year where they booked a high school football game for a high school that didn't even really exist, right? That's what seems to me, that's the immediate example of, hey, if there are some shady characters out there looking to make a buck and you already have travel ball experience, you go ahead and just make some phone calls. You pop up a website. There you go. You got a prep school. You rake in the money. You play some games. And then if somebody does any digging, you're in big trouble. That sound about right to you?
Yeah, that one still blows my mind, doesn't it? You'd have thought at least they just, hey, can you give us a media guide or can I speak to your principal? Something would have came along.
How about the audacity to play a game on Friday night and then on Monday night? You just talk about ultimate greed. That'll get you caught real quick. And I think that's what happened in that specific situation we're talking about. I haven't talked to you since the draft went down, and that's another part of this recipe. Maybe the main reason why renewing scholarships July 1 makes zero sense for college baseball these days. What'd you make of this year's draft specifically? What stood out to you? To me, it was from the Gamecock perspective, 4 guys ended up getting drafted, but none until rounds 15 and later.
I felt like early on you didn't see as many high school kids go in those first picks as much as maybe you have. I think that shows the respect Major League Baseball now has for college baseball. It has become really a nice, just area for them to see guys grow in. As far as Gamecocks though, I made sure that I'd say it. There were some great kids drafted on the second day, but Josiah Seitler's story to me was the one that had me so excited. And I'm not sure if he's made his decision yet, whether he signs with the Pirates or comes back. It's always a negotiation, I know, but to just see his name pop up for what he went through. You got to remember back, he was a possible first couple round draft pick in high school.
Out of Swansea, right?
At Swansea High School, and actually probably might have been the first high school kid out of this state to go that year. I mean, their scouts that still tell me they were going to take him in the first 3 rounds, and he tore his non-throwing shoulder diving for a ball in the outfield as a high school senior in a showcase game. So it led him to South Carolina, and boy, what a pleasure he was to coach, along with all these others. But he was just that guy you admired every day. You could not beat him to the stadium. I always joke, like, you must just sleep here, because you'd try to get there and he'd be in the weight room already. And he was so, warm. It's like, hey, good morning. You get that big voice of his as you walked into the stadium. So to see him get drafted and now at least have the option if he wants to come back or go to pro baseball, I'm super excited for him. And, then the other guys I keep following, kind of like probably everybody on social media. I'm not sure what a Wimmer does. I know I saw where Hicks got an opportunity to get drafted, which says a lot about him. I think he only, had 1 or 2 appearances here.
Mm-hmm.
Bosnick, who's already decided to go in the portal and go to Arkansas, but now he gets drafted. So in this, usually at the end of the draft, like you see guys, usually they've already kind of committed to those teams. Those teams now at only 20 rounds don't tend to waste picks like they used to. And you'll see a lot of free agents, because if you're a junior, you're a free agent, and I've already started to see some guys around the country signing free agent contracts, even though they didn't get drafted, which in the old draft would have been your 27th round pick. And now they're just called free agents. So it allows them to pick and choose a little more as well. So the draft is always interesting. But now, like we're saying, all these timelines, draft's not until July 17th. It used to be like June 12th. And you had so much time to figure your roster out. Now you got the transfer portal. It's almost impossible to have your roster settle. That first day of team meeting, you almost have to pass out name tags just to remember who's who. And, oh, God, I forgot he came back. Or, oh, man, I forgot he signed. So it's some weird team meetings. And then personally for me to watch Tucker Tolman get drafted, that was cool. Being on the phone with his dad, texting as that's kind of going down, and that he thought he was going to get drafted about the 30 pick. And then, oh, my God, we may not get drafted. And then his dad's texting me, we're going 77th, to the Blue Jays. And I'm looking at TV, and they're on like pick 61. I'm like, how do you know you're going 77th? But he did it. So super excited for him. And I think for what Tuck's going to get, he'll be signing and not going to LSU. But it's just really it was a fun 3 days to get to watch.
In your opinion, how do high school kids know that they're going to head to pro ball? I'm sure it's individualistic, right? And there are a ton of different things that go into it. But it just seems like at some point, the reputation gets out there, the perspective gets out there that, yeah, this guy's either going to be a college guy or he's going to be a pro ball guy. Is there any kind of determining factor that you've seen through the years that usually pushes guys one way or the other?
Well, I think it's all in the families, too, of what they have prepared for. I kind of felt Tucker was going to be a guy because as a hitter, and his dad knows so well, as a hitter, you want to get on into pro ball if you're an elite guy, because it gives you time to develop, especially now that they're going to pay him well. He's going to get plenty of opportunities over the next few years. So I knew he really wanted to do that. There was a kid in our state, Tristan Smith, who's one of the best left-handed pitchers in the country, from what I was told by scouts, just wanted way more money than we could spend. That was no knock. He never did anything wrong. He never got worse. He's in Clemson's the big winner, because now he's going to go to Clemson, I assume, because that's who he'd signed with. But he had just outpriced himself and maybe just wasn't ready to go, and we didn't know. But usually these scouts, it's unbelievable how much time they spend with the elite kids early on. Just Tucker seemed like every time I talked to him, some scout was in their house or some scout was at practice. if you're going to be picked in that first, second round, those guys' jobs depend on you signing or telling them the truth. You know, when you tell them you're going to sign, they take you with their first or second pick and you don't. A lot of guys lose jobs on that because that was your job to know, hey, then let's don't draft Tim Hill. You know, let's don't waste our pick on a guy who isn't going to sign, but let's put our pick on a guy who we think's really good and is going to sign. But the money now is incredible. I mean, you're talking the guys in that first round is getting between $2 and $4 million. And that's just money that's hard to turn down.
Couple of things in there. As you were talking about that process with the scouts, especially reminded me of the first episode of The Captain. Have you checked it out, the Derek Jeter deal?
Absolutely. We watched it in a hotel room that night, so, you know, you can really just sit there. You're right at the TV. And what I got from it immediately and what I hope my son did and what I hope every young person does is everything is not as easy as you think. You know, I love the comment, work so hard that they think you're an overnight sensation, because nobody sees all that work. There's so much to hear a Derek Jeter going, I was ready to go home. You know, I made a mistake, you know, and he's so human in that first episode. I don't know where to go for 6 more. You know, how's Mariah Carey working into this? I'm excited to see that part.
I don't think
that's going to be great.
Yeah, Jeter's in charge of this thing. It's a lot like Jordan with The Last Dance. I think we're going to get it told how he wants it told, and that's
Yeah, I would love the gift basket stories have always been great. They probably won't make this show, but I just thought the first episode was awesome, and then to see that group, their big three, or God, however many it was, when they all start meeting each other in the low minor leagues, and you know, Hayden, even my son, we're laughing because he's like, that's Steinbrenner, because he knew him from Seinfeld, you know, the old Seinfeld, because we still watch him in our house so much. So it was so many cool little connections. And I forgot he had been suspended. I mean, think about it. George Steinbrenner wasn't even a part of the organization when they were drafting all these guys. Mm-hmm. Or him to call Andy Pettit, you know, his uncle. I mean, I thought that was funny when those just little stories that are so much baseball. I can't wait to watch all of them.
So when you were saying that the scouts and the process there, the process for Derek Jeter was he was told that he was going to be the number 1 overall pick or the number 5 overall pick. He was neither. And they went through in that first episode and said how many scouts with those particular organizations tried to convince their teams to take Derek Jeter, and they ignored them. They ended up taking 5 college guys before Jeter was taken 6th there with the Yankees. Yeah. So I had forgotten that specific type of history, and it's really interesting to hear kind of the behind the scenes on that, or at least how it's told now years later.
Oh, no question. I'd forgot it too. And just to see those notes, just how they were kind of written, and, you know, that was an era before they were typing everything and emailing everything. And it was just awesome to go back to that time, because he's obviously right at my age. So I was in college myself as he's getting drafted, and you're starting to see that Yankee dynasty coming together. And I forgot Buck Showalter, another Seinfeld episode, but yep. I forgot he was that original quote manager of that group, you know. And gosh, even the Mariners game, I told Hayden as they started showing how that Seattle game, that first one, I said, it's going to end with, and then he's like, I know, you've told me that. It was one of those games that stick in your head, because that's when pro baseball was getting you again. Remember, this was right after the draft.
Right.
So we'd all gone through the draft and, we hate the game, everybody, all that stuff. So it was bringing the game back. And so It was an exciting era for me.
No doubt. Me too. I'm with you in there. But again, I explained it. I'm still trying to figure it out. And I wanted to watch the second episode last night, but I was doing a bunch of SEC Media Day stuff, so I haven't done it yet. I got it on the DVR. Looking forward to watching this weekend. But I'm trying to figure out how I'm watching this thing, because I'm not a Yankees guy. And I still always admired Derek Jeter, but I wouldn't cross the line and say, oh, I'm a Derek Jeter fan. Right. But I think it's more the psychology of one of the biggest winners we've ever seen in sports. Like how the fact that he, in that first episode, he's like, yeah, I'm a big I told you so guy. Like, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's one way to be. And it's always fascinating to me how these super achievers, even outside of sports, like just their mindset, to hear them talk about it, their perspective. And I really like that part too, that you mentioned about what a struggle it was early on for Jeter in the minor leagues.
Yeah, I thought, gosh, first episode, how much more could you get in from his mom talking about what they went through, and just, you could just tell how, I don't think they were grooming him to be, in a lot of senses, parents. Yeah, you want your son to be the whatever, but I don't think anybody can predict you were going to turn into what he did in a sense of the success. But you can just see how he was groomed to handle adversity. And even the guy that was, like the dad said once, the mom said, okay, come on home. No, he's not coming home. Right. I mean, it's so, as far as a parent, it was just such a human side of, that's what we forget a lot, is we've sat here and just, kind of casually talked about transferring. I remember what my parents went through when I'm transferring. I mean, it's not like it's just that easy. Now, oh my God, now you got to find an apartment to live in. You got to find a roommate to live with. You were living in a dorm, so now the apartment you got's unfurnished. There's so much that people are forgetting goes into these little coin flip of, I'll go here, I'll go there, and this and that. That's not what it was supposed to be. That's where I get frustrated on the outside, that let's slow down some. And that's what was cool about them, is they were preparing him for, hey, this stuff ain't going to be easy. And it wasn't easy. And he talked about how he kind of kicked it in that overdrive, but that wasn't until he was 20 years old. And then to think he wasn't even on the active roster in that Mariners game we're talking about. All them guys it's so cool to see them sitting in that dugout, and we know them as Hall of Famers. They weren't even active. I mean, you still had guys that you couldn't even name playing while they're sitting in the dugout, not available. So I hope, as baseball people, younger players watch it and realize this thing, you're not a Hall of Famer the first day. It takes work, and it's going to take a commitment. I tell my son all the time, if you're fortunate enough to play at the next level, find someone that's going to make you work. Find someone that's going to obviously believe in you, but challenge you, because you're not going to get better if somebody's always telling you you're good. Then you're just going to go, well, why am I here? Why do I need to lift more? Why do I need to hit more? I'm already great. And then the reality hits you that, just like the other day, I made a comment, it's hard to get drafted. I mean, I've coached at big schools the majority of my career, and you think you got 8 or 9 guys, and usually you get 3 or 4. 1 year at Ole Miss, we led the country in draft picks, and we're sitting there going, oh my God, I think we had like 11 kids get drafted off our 05 team. And normally, though, that don't happen. So it is really, really hard. And I know I'm drifting away from it, but Derek Jeter, I think that's going to be something coaches can show their players throughout the year, or when those kids are ready to transfer, bring it up. Hey, do you remember that? We showed you that episode, how hard it was. Are you sure you want to leave your teammates in this environment? And I think it'll be used a lot by people.
Yeah, you're talking about Derek Jeter and overcoming adversity and being groomed for that, and his parents, what they did. Well, you have to have your parents be strong figures, I think, in a lot of ways. But just the elements he was presented with, I think, also just helped kind of chisel him into what he became. The race situation that you're talking about, and then just being a baseball player in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Right, that ain't growing up where A-Rod did down in South Florida, right? You got all kinds of stuff. You got to really love baseball to be a baseball player in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Yeah, you do. I tell you, and they've kind of already teased us a little bit. I can't wait to the episode when A-Rod does become, because as Jeter said in episode 1, I was a shortstop. There wasn't none of this. He made that very clear in episode 1. I am the shortstop. And but yeah, you play in those type of weather, there's no doubt. Your season didn't start till late. I can only imagine trying to play baseball in Michigan in February. I mean, it's how miserable we get playing baseball here in February a lot. Right. So it definitely mindset did it, and then but that showed you the Yankees minor league system, how important it was to them. They knew where they were sending guys. And the real organizations that now still do it. I mean, the Atlanta Braves, to be honest, developed most of this team that they're doing through their minor league. That's why their manager's there now, because he was developing through it with them. So it's still cool to see that there's a lot of old school in baseball. Maybe not as much as it was in Derek Jeter's early years, but there still are a lot of old school baseball.
No doubt. You mentioned the transfer environment these days, and Nick mentions, at least on the football side of things, the flip side of guys transferring, that there's some of those guys will be millionaires or close to it. And I thought it was really interesting yesterday, SEC Media Days, Josh Heupel pointing out that Hendon Hooker is everything that is good for name, image, and likeness. I think he's written a kid's book about the ABCs of Scripture, I believe it is, or something to that effect. It's going to be fascinating for me to see how these guys handled their money. And I think in 2022, we're getting to the point where it's a lot easier to be educated about handling your money well than it ever has been. And I think these big time athletic departments, whatever, especially football, basketball, the whole thing, know that it's a recruiting advantage for them now to educate their people on how to use their money well, and then to get good PR off of that and to have that become a trend. I'm hopeful from that standpoint, Stuart. You being on the ground floor and talking to coaches and programs from the baseball perspective, are you hearing any horror stories about guys buying Hummers and whatever it is these days? It's probably not a Hummer anymore, right? It's probably I don't know, a Bentley or whatever the car is. I'm sure your son knows, being a high school senior now. You hearing any of those horror stories about basically bonus babies in the NIL world?
Well, it hadn't got out yet. I'm sure it will come very soon. The thing you hear now is, as an older scout was joking with me on one of those mic'd up shows, he goes, the conversations have changed. I think it was even like Carolina, where he said, like, Rattler, I guess they had him mic'd up, was talking to the coach about cars. Like, oh, you got one of those? I haven't got that. He said his fear was, and it's mine too, he goes, I'm afraid we're trying to, like everything else, make them grow up too quick. I mean, when you were in college, you remember, we were lucky to be like Ace Ventura in a car. None of us are sitting around talking cars with our coaches, and now you have to hope that the education part is there, because, I actually had someone say to me yesterday, and this is something to remember, how is it going to look when you get an NIL for Tim Hill and I get him in baseball, $75,000, and he ain't playing?
Mm-hmm.
He goes, what's that conversation going to be between, one, you and that family of the kid that's sitting over there making, and then two, even more, that booster that you convinced to, hey, I need Tim Hill. You got to help me get this money. And then that guy's going to go, hold on now. He ain't even playing. So where's my money going? And as I was sitting here this morning waiting to jump on with you, I follow a lot of Ole Miss stuff. Ole Miss quietly stuck in the end of a column about the Manning. They're building a new Olivia and Archie Manning football building, that the new softball stadium has been put on hold. The expansion and upgrades to their football stadium have been put on hold. And they clearly said, because we were so unsure of what NIL money we need to help our athletic programs improve. So the day of the expand, as you look at, Williams-Brice behind you, those days are done for a while. There's no more, Clemson, South Carolina football buildings going to be popping up, because the money, just think about it. As the Gamecock club, I would be sitting here going, okay, how are we getting this money while the NIL money's going over here to the Garnet Trust and these collectives? I can't imagine the discussions going on of how to keep things going normal, because nothing's normal. That money now of the who was it? I was just reading one of the football things yesterday, is going to give every player on their team
Texas Tech.
That money used to go into the stadium or go into, whatever, the locker room, or go into the way you travel. Well, now that money's not going to be there anymore. They want that money to go straight into that guy's pocket. It's just going to be crazy to me to do it.
The Matador Club at Texas Tech announcing they're going to pay everybody on the football team, 100 guys, to $25,000. which I think the math is $2.5 million would have gone to the athletic department, right? For probably stadium improvements or locker room improvements or the whole thing. To me, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, right? Yeah. You go to big time athletic departments across the country and it's sparkling facilities. And I mean, how long could that have gone on? Where was that going? Right. Just see Williams-Brice Stadium now compared to what it was when I was in school 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. It's almost like a completely different experience all the way around and inside the building as well. So I don't think it's a bad thing. Nick, hilarious. I can hear it in recruiting talks. We've got one of the best financial advisors in the country here to assist you. Hey man, that's real already. Like that is not even a farce or satire anymore. That is happening right now for sure. Where I think there are a couple of things as you were talking about the booster and the coach deal. That's why Lane Kiffin said at Media Days the other day, he's like, coaches should be in charge of this thing to avoid that issue. And I get it from the coach's perspective. I just think that's asking for too much right now. And I don't have much sympathy for coaches and boosters having issues there. I think there have always been issues, but now it's going to be a little bit trickier for sure. And I'm hopeful that this market is eventually going to stabilize to some degree. The Matador Club and all the oil guys involved in that thing, they're either going to figure out paying $25,000 per player is a good move, or they need to just go $2.5 million to get a big-time recruit in specifically. And all these companies, all these people investing in money or investing in NIL deals are going to figure out whether it's worth it, whether they're getting the return on investment or they're not. It's just going to take a little while, I think, Stuart, for everybody to figure that out. You on board with that or no?
Oh, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's just so wide open right now. You don't have anything to base it on. I mean, nothing. I mean, you know, I would have loved it said in a meeting who brought that up to the Matador Club,
right?
You know, to think that they do it.
It was totally their football coach. He's been out there saying, yeah, a lot of people are going to have issues of unequal pay or guys getting paid a ton of money before they've ever played it down, and we're not going to have that at Texas Tech. And there's something that's going to happen that's going to help us out. And then all of a sudden, boom, there it is. It's crazy. And Trey's like, how is that not pay to play? It completely is, Trey. Completely is. Like they're saying they need to do things in the community to get their money and the whole thing. Yeah, okay. Right.
Well, the funny thing now is they say, you know, we're going through it with Texas A&M. You can't use money to,
incentivize, right?
Yeah. Well, what do you come on? I mean, let's just grow up in the conversation and realize what that guy was saying that day, that all those people up there pay. Well, of course they are. I mean, that's what they're there for.
Well,
I mean,
again, that's why Lane Kiffin put out the point of a salary cap. Where are you on that? Trey says salary caps aren't going to be liked, but they make sense. I would much prefer an honest conversation that included a salary cap than where we're at right now. I'm not for a cap necessarily, and I'm hopeful that the market can stabilize. But in the interim, it's absolutely ridiculous where we're at, thinking that it's not pay for play.
Oh yeah, it's definitely pay for play, and I think it's a salary cap. But the salary cap would, I mean, you're gonna have to just sit there. It's about to be a Power 4 because it appears the Pac-12's done, so it'll no longer be the Power 5 schools. I assume that conference is gonna kind of fall to the wayside. Did it happen yesterday that Arizona and Arizona State and all them, did they apply for the Big 12? I was trying to keep up with that.
Officially, I don't think, but
it's definitely
happen. Right. It's definitely kind of in the works there. And then you get a Power 4, which nobody really buys. I don't think even the Big 12 at that point. And listening to the ACC kickoff and their commissioner the other day, I would not want to be in that conference right now.
No, I wouldn't either. So that's where the salary cap is so hard right now because nobody knows where they're going to fall. You know, if they really felt like they were going to be one of the elite teams and be in the SEC, which is really the one conference is like that, again, it's just all so new. And as I told you, there's a website, it's called D1 that, a lot of coaches, since COVID, it's amazing how many ADs have retired. I mean, they're just blatantly saying, I don't want to deal with this. So you got a group of people now moving into those roles that even haven't been ADs yet. I just think there's I think it's going to take a couple of years for all this to settle in, see if the Matador Club ideas are good, because they're businesses too. If the end of next year they look at 2.5 million got wasted, they're not giving it back. But if they see that did help their business to make money, they're not giving that money just to win games. They're giving that money to get priority on something. Life ain't changed that much. They now want to be able to come to practices that are closed or, see things happen. So it's going to be we laugh at Jerry Maguire when it came out and how that's what it's going to be. You're going to need agents to help your coaches because there's going to be so much. What are we going to tell that guy that calls us and says, hey, I want to bring my grandkids to practice. We want to come in the locker room. You can't do that. Oh, well, not 2.5 million, then I need it back. Of course they're doing it to get something. I mean, we can all say we love our school, but they're doing it to get something. And that's when it's going to get really hard. But again, it's going to get really hard when those kids aren't playing that are getting the money. I mean, you look at a baseball team this year, you want to play your best 9 players. You don't want to play your best, highest paid players. And in college baseball, there are people giving money to guys that haven't even seen play. So you don't know how it's going to be. I don't know. I can go different ways with it because I don't know how it's going to end up for people. I don't.
Trey says, I don't know what it is, but you need some form of national parameters, but then we're relying on DC to do something, and we know how that goes. Jimbo Fisher was talking about that yesterday at SEC Media Days, how the state of Texas has the same law that the state of South Carolina does that was recently suspended in South Carolina, by the way, where schools can't technically have anything to do with NIL deals. And state to state, it's so different. Jimbo was talking about the challenges of that he's seen that other states, they already have a contract ready to go for those people who are going to sign scholarships, which is obvious, clear, blatant pay for play. You just fill in a different date, right? And as long as you've already enrolled, the dates after that, you're good to go with name, image, and likeness. It's a mess in so many ways.
And I can tell Jimbo this much. Over the next 6 months, the politicians are not going to be focused on college football. I think we know that with the midterm elections. I don't think they're going to go, let's freeze now and get the football thing straight.
Well, only if they think it can help them get elected, right?
Again, it goes back. Yeah, the Matador Club. Hey, what do we get out of this? If this is going to get us the votes in this part of the country, then we do. But again, you don't know. They don't know who to be loyal to because they don't know their conferences either. Right. I mean, you go all in to help the ACC if you're a Virginia senator, and all of a sudden, hey, we're not going to be in the ACC. We're going to move to the oh God. So it's going to be crazy how these conferences settle. That's what I'm wondering is, and how big can you get to where you're talking about conferences are going to be so big you don't play over half the teams even in conference. That's crazy to think of the way we've grown up with conference play and everybody plays each other and they're going to get so big. It's going to be like the AFC North, the AFC East, the AFC West. You just don't even play each other except every 2 or 3 years.
Well, I mean, you could make the argument that it's already done that in a lot of ways, certainly in the SEC when you got, I think, 12 years between some visits from one school to another. Just ridiculous. So I'm hopeful it'll get a little bit better, but who knows? I wanted to transition the conversation back to football if we could. I started the show, Stuart, today talking about the awful news of Phil Petty passing away yesterday from the Gamecock perspective, a guy that so many fans, so many teammates and coaches respected and just loved in so many ways and have so many great memories of. What do you remember most about Phil Petty being the Gamecocks quarterback back in the day and unfortunately passing away at the age of 43?
I know. When I saw it yesterday and I was talking to one of my former players this morning, as a coach, they stay the same age in your mind. So when I saw that tweet yesterday, I'm like, oh my God, how's a 20-some-year-old guy? What happened? You just forget that, okay, that was when I started my career. When I was coming in South Carolina in 1998, he's coming in from Boiling Springs. And I'll be honest, he was a great baseball player. We talked to some people yesterday. If he hadn't have been a football quarterback and Lou Holtz was trying to turn everything around, he could have played baseball at this level, most likely. He was a tremendous athlete. And back then, as I told some people yesterday, we shared the weight room back then. with football, basically everybody went to Williams-Brice. There was no other weight room like now. There's, each sport basically has one. So you saw him a lot, and I was a Gamecock fan. So when I went in that weight room, as I've told you the Lou Holtz stories, I was a fan in there. I was seeing Lou Holtz. I'm looking at Phil Petty, who I know's coming to be the quarterback, and I would watch, and what a nice person. I mean, I just remember our players, I would always needle them a little bit to find out about a guy, like, hey, what's so-and-so like? And, we had Sheldon Brown, so I could say, hey, what's this guy like? I never heard any of them take a shot at him. There was jealousy all the time. I mean, guys, they were young kids. They're probably a girlfriend problem. There's something where normally they'd say, this guy's this or that guy's that. No one ever said that about him. And when he would be around with our players, maybe you'd see him up in the, the old Roost right there was the academic center, and there was a lunchroom, and you'd see him. He always spoke, and he'd always say, hey, coach. And, you lose touch with these guys once they go into their real world. But it was amazing. As soon as I read that tweet yesterday, I see us at the Outback Bowl. I still have a blanket that Dr. McGee bought all of us. It said, 2000, whatever, Outback champion. And it was a sad day. And, I pray for him, his family. But as a Gamecock fan, boy, you talk about handling adversity. I mean, for what those guys went through to go 1-21 at the beginning of their career, and to then turn it around and win 9 games, win bowl games, it showed a lot about him. And he just always seemed to be, their captain when I would see him in that environment.
Steady, I think, is maybe the word that comes to mind. And what you got to have, I think, is priority number one for a quarterback. I mean, you got to be talented, like you mentioned, and he was. But if I'm going to eventually I'm going to tell my kids about him, right? And I think steady will probably be it, and leader, and a guy that in the critical moments came up big on the field for sure, but also what you mentioned, like off the field, going through that, man, as the leader of a team is not easy. And Eric Kemry had a tremendously appropriate and, as usual, fitting tribute to Phil Petty yesterday on Twitter, just a series of 5 tweets. And one of those, I think it might have even started with it, how difficult it was, how many hits he took, and going 21 straight losses and being that guy and then turning it around, and how he embodied so many things that you want athletes to embody on the field and off the field in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and we sat here this morning already, and we've talked about paying this and paying that, but you go back and you look at your Super Bowl teams, you go back and you look at national championship teams, and you look at what Phil Petty was for those bowl championship teams. You got to have a good quarterback. And as much as I sit here with my Cleveland hat on and joke, it's really ever hard to say we're in and we're going to win it when you don't even know who your quarterback is. That was the one thing that Phil Petty brought at a time where it seemed like we hadn't had one forever at South Carolina. He just brought a calmness to the quarterback position. I remember as a young kid growing up, you had the Mike Hold and those guys on that 84 team. You knew your quarterback. But it feels like I know Tannehill was in there kind of when I was in college, but you go from about the mid-'80s when Todd Ellis and those guys were gone, you didn't even know your quarterback. You couldn't even name them. If someone said right now, Tim Hill, I'll give you $1 million to name the starting quarterback, and you throw some year like 1995, you'd have to sit there and go, who the heck was the quarterback then? Was it a transfer to come in? So he was the first guy you just remembered again. And some of my former players, gosh, I forget how young they were. They're like, he's the first Gamecock jersey I wanted. That's how young they were, that, he was a guy. I mean, we were on national TV winning, and that hadn't happened in, forever. So yeah, I think
just that, Stuart, 2001, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State.
Yeah.
Beat all of those teams
of
in the same season that now dominate college football.
Yeah.
Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. And it was the second win against Ohio State in a row there in the Outback Bowl. Just, just even I was, I watched all those games. I lived all of that. Phil Petty was not my first guy. I was already out of college at that point, but just to see that again and to see the perspective of that now makes it even more impressive. And Phil Petty deserves a ton of that credit.
Yeah, I don't think as Gamecock fans we've slowed down enough to realize what happened even back then. I don't think we get enough. We kind of all got caught up in Coach Spurrier's era, but for what really happened to go 1-21, can you imagine if social media had been as strong during that time?
Oh.
I mean, does Lou Holtz survive? Does Lou Holtz have time to, as I told you that story when he said, a couple of years, I want you to be scared walking in here because my guys are so big. And that's what he said to me and Coach Tolman standing there that day. Nobody in here scares you. I'm talking about his offensive lineman is what he meant, and defensive lineman. He understood clearly you don't win in the SEC unless your offense and defensive line are massive. And when we look back at Coach Spurrier's team, we had Connor Shaw, we had all these great people around, but think how big our defensive line was and our offensive line. I mean, those guys, but you got to have a guy. And I just remember, again, Phil Petty in that locker weight room, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on, but that dude just always was calm, seemed to always walk by you and say, hey, coach, how you doing? He was never too caught up that he was out of it. So I think that's an error that sometimes gets forgotten of what they did to come back and do that.
All that Quincy Carter Heisman talk, Nick says. Phil Petty came in, took care of business. Quincy Carter threw 5 picks. What a game. That was win number 2 after the 21-game losing streak there. New Mexico State win number 1, and then Quincy Carter comes in, preseason Heisman guy. Jan weighing in says, I guarantee you people in Columbus, Ohio know the name Phil Petty. That's a good point, Jan. All these years later, 20-plus years later, Phil Petty, he's a legend for sure. And you're probably right. Probably not talked about as much because, Ryan Brewer was such a legend at that time and got a bunch of that credit, especially in the Outback Bowl game and the story against Ohio State and the whole thing is that. But I think that also embodies who Phil Petty was too. Like not a necessarily guy that everyone in the SEC is talking about, right? But just solid. And now you look back on it and say, oh man, he accomplished a ton.
Well, and it just goes into his private life. Like, I'll be honest, I don't know what he had done once his career had been over. But then as soon as yesterday happened, you just start seeing tweets and things from people saying how he was still a leader of their group. I mean, he was still the guy that they wanted him to be around them. So it's a tremendous, and he was a South Carolina guy. I mean, we feel like at this school a lot of times, well, we got to get a national guy. You got to get a national guy. We guys from Boiling Springs, South Carolina. I mean, he was a guy that grew up in this state that all the high school coaches, I follow so many are friends with them yesterday. It was just cool to hear the high school coaches were so proud as they are. So many of these South Carolina kids have gone on to be successes here. But it's a sad day, and to be that young, and hopefully it's something that they can have a tribute to him this football season too. And can be remembered for what he did. Because I'm going to tell you, as a Gamecock fan, I was a Gamecock coach at the time. Boy, when they started winning, how much better it made all of us feel. And that was a big deal.
The Cotton Gin there in 5 points, putting up a tribute. This is a picture from their Twitter, RIP Phil Petty, forever to thee. Connor Shaw putting out his thoughts on Twitter yesterday. My last interaction with Phil, throwing the ball around with his son on the sidelines before a Carolina game last fall. All we talked about was our families. Really saddened to hear the news today, praying for his family. I know he was very proud of them and recently returned to Columbia to help coach Gray Collegiate Athletics. Had a college assistant coaching career with Skip Holtz at East Carolina. Some of the post-graduate, post-South Carolina things that Phil Petty was into. And again, just all across the board, so many thoughts and prayers for his family, his kids, and a lot of great memories on the football field for Gamecock fans in so many ways. But the turnaround that Lou Holtz led from 21 straight losses to 2 straight Outback Bowl wins at the time. And again, it's one of those things that you might have heard and you even know was the best turnaround in the country and one of the best in the history of college football. Jan says just physically nauseated all day yesterday after the news came down, and I know so many people were. And I guess that is a decent place for us to talk about, Stuart, today, where the SEC Media Days preseason poll will come out now that thing has recapped. Where you got the Gamecocks finishing? Where do you – I guess there are two different questions, right? Where would you vote for them to finish in the SEC East, 1 through 7, and where do you think they'll end up today? As I think who put it out yesterday for us, a resident Clemson fan, actually, Troy, went 1 through 7, and I agreed with all 1 through 7, and he had the Gamecocks predicted to finish 5th. He thinks that's where they're going to come in the poll. What about you?
Yeah, I'll be honest. If you'd have just made me like you did say it, I was going to say 4th or 5th. I haven't put enough time. I hadn't even got my Athlon book, my magazine yet to start figuring it out. Me and Hayden were driving back from Charleston. We finished our summer tournament, and they're like, all right, now we got to get focused. We got fantasy football coming up. We got to start figuring out college football. So I love the Bobby Harden in Charleston. I joke, we might be one of the last few magazine guys. I still love getting the magazine, but I think if you could realistically in the SEC see yourself in that 4th or 5th, then you got a chance to have had a pretty good season. But it's going to be hard. It's now. Again, I say this as a Gamecock fan. We get so out of our even imagination sometimes. Let's realize it's year 2, and let's enjoy the fact we had a good year last year. We got a bowl. My goal is I want to be in a bowl every year. To me, Christmas just stinks when you don't have a bowl game to think about. That extra day of just enjoying people. So my goal is always in my mind is let's be in a bowl. Let's be in a good bowl. But in our East right now, I mean, obviously you got to start with the Georgias and the different things. But I'm excited for this team. I don't know it good enough yet because I haven't been able to pay attention like I will in the next few weeks. But I would think 4th or 5th would be a very fair pick.
Now, as you're going through that, there's so many different things to get to. And Jason says, I still get the Lindy's NFL magazine. I'm an old-fashioned man. There's something about just – I'll give you guys some hope for the future. I got 9- and 7-year-old boys, and they love those magazines. I mean, they still look at ones that are years old, right? So I don't think it's necessarily an age thing that you like to have it physically tangible. I think there is something to that. Not, fortunately, my 9- and 7-year-old aren't looking at their cell phones and checking out the preseason stuff, which I hope they never have cell phones. But my point in this is that the conversation around SEC Media Days is we all know Georgia's number 1 in the East. We all know Vandy's going to be number 7. It's that 2 through 6, man. When you had Florida finish 6th last year, the Gamecocks finished 5th, pretty much in the tiebreaker, same record as Missouri, but Missouri won the head-to-head. When you had Tennessee as the only team to finish 500, and then you had Kentucky in 2nd. And we all know what Kentucky doesn't get any credit in the SEC, and I don't know what it's going to take for them to get it. I mean, they get some, I guess. I think most of us think they're a cute little story, and Mark Stoops is a cute little coach, but it's still Kentucky. Right, and they lose the big-time playmaker and Robinson on the outside, and I think most of us feel like they're going to take a step back. And that 2nd spot, it's been the conversation. It's up for grabs, and South Carolina is in the conversation because of the improvement from last year, and then adding pieces. One of those pieces, Stuart, got some news yesterday. A transfer wide receiver, Corey Rucker from Arkansas State, on the Biletnikoff Award watch list. Now, the watch lists are maybe the dumbest thing in the history of sports, right? There's so many watch lists out there. There's so many people on them. Some of these watch lists have hundreds of guys, if not right at 100 or whatever. I think there are only 43 guys on this thing. I didn't even know that you don't have to be a wide receiver to win the Biletnikoff Award. It's just the best receiver in college football. So if you play a different position, you can still win that thing. You want to guess how many Gamecocks have ever won the Biletnikoff Award, Stuart?
I can't imagine there's any. I mean, you think back to Sterling Sharp and.
Well, I didn't know this either. I did the research today. The Biletnikoff Award's only been in existence since '94. So maybe Sterling Sharp would have won it back in the day, but they didn't even have the award back then.
Yeah.
There's one guy that has been a finalist in South Carolina history, one wide receiver since 1994 who's been a finalist on the Biletnikoff for the Biletnikoff Award. They only got 3 finalists. You You want to guess who that was?
Oh, man.
Fun little game.
I know. It was who? Alshon?
Yeah. Well done. That's one of the reasons why I thought I lobbed you a softball there, and you nailed it.
That's
You did it
nice.
out of the
I had to get my mind going. Well, you took me one way and then brought me back another one. You said you don't have to be a receiver or wide receiver. So I'm trying to think, did we have some great tight end or running back that was catching passes? So
right. Well, that was the old rope-a-dope. Like, see this and stick him right in the gut, man. I swear, I knew you could handle it. I would only do that if I knew you could handle it. So 2010, Alshon was a finalist, the only time a Gamecock has been in that final three. The great wide receivers that I saw, Sterling Sharp and then Robert Brooks right after him. Even Sidney Rice, I thought would have gotten maybe a finalist spot, but didn't. He only played those 2 years at Carolina, so maybe a big reason why. But I would have put Corey Rucker third on the Gamecocks depth chart in getting this award watch list deal. He comes from Arkansas State. He's had a good 2 years there, and I think was on some freshman All-American lists last year, even though it was second year because of COVID, and we don't know what to call these guys anymore anyway, right? But the numbers for Rucker are pretty good. 826 yards last year. He's got, I think, 1,200 plus for his career, 14 career touchdowns. He had a game in his very first year against Louisiana Monroe where he had 310 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. You can do that in a game. You're something in college football. I don't care what level it is exactly, but to do it on just the next level down as opposed to Division 2 or 3 is impressive. Now you got Juice Wells in, who I think has more buzz around him from James Madison than Corey Rucker does from Arkansas State, and you got Josh Vann doing what he did last year, in my mind, becoming a legit number one guy in the SEC. This goes to the larger conversation, Stuart, of where do you pick South Carolina in the SEC East and why. You can make the argument with Spencer Rattler on offense that Marcus Satterfield offense that was not impressive in year number one will be much more impressive and has a lot more weapons. Your excitement level, I know you say you're still in the early stages of building up the information, and maybe that leads to the optimism for a lot of Gamecock fans, and you mentioned how that can get way out of control sometimes. But I understand how you can build a case here, and I think you can do it pretty quickly. And also, I think it was pretty telling that Shane Beamer wasn't trying to sell guys at SEC Media Days necessarily. I think he was more presenting the program and maybe even making sure not to do that because knowing Gamecock fans and the propensity to go, hey, yeah, if you don't win 9 or 10 games in year number 2, you're going to be mad and how nuts that can be. But I say all of that just to say there are a lot of positive signs. This might be one of, if not the biggest one, that you can have a guy getting some national preseason credit, and he might not be your best wide receiver. That's a much better place than South Carolina has been in recent years. It's an unfamiliar place, really.
Well, the key is, to me, again, we go back, is Rattler as good as advertised? Because if he is, you've got a quarterback. And that's, as we just said, every good team, when you go back through history, college or pro, they've got that quarterback. So if he is that guy, then he certainly allows these receivers to get the attention that they seem like they're going to deserve. I'm going to start my acclamation today. Everybody forget we play Georgia a noon game, right?
That's right. Week 3.
So I'm going to be outside. I'm going to staying out. I'm already getting myself mentally and physically prepared for these day games, because our fans got to realize we got to show up for noon games, because we got a night game to open the year and then 2 back-to-back noon games, I think.
Yep.
Isn't it like Georgia's here at noon and then at Arkansas at noon or something?
Flip. Arkansas's week 2. Yep.
Yeah.
Which will be an 11 a.m. kickoff there.
Right.
And then it'll be Georgia at home week 3. You get the night game against Georgia State to start against Sean Elliott and company. But you're right. You got to get, if you're not ready for noon September games, if you're just walking in there thinking it's going to be comfortable, good luck. Right? Yeah. You better have some sort of air-conditioned area you're watching that thing, or real quick access. DC hits us up 1 through 7. What do you think of how he ranked this thing in the SEC East? Stuart, Georgia 1, Kentucky 2, Tennessee 3, Florida 4, Mizzou 5, the Gamecocks 6th, and Vandy 7th.
Yeah, you hit one earlier. It was funny. As a Gamecock fan, I still just go, oh, Kentucky, that's cool. We're going to beat them. Seems like we never do anymore, but I always put them behind us. I still feel like Missouri. How in the world do we keep losing to Missouri? If you ever go to Columbia, Missouri, it's so depressing. And then you're like, how are they beating us? So to me, yeah, I'm bumping us up, further up. And Kentucky, I'm about tired of all that. They're, finishing it. They never win any big games. Let's just bump them on back to the end, stick them down there with Vandy and Missouri. Let's say we're in the top 4. So now Georgia, we'll give it to them. They're in there. Tennessee's going to be, you just never know what's going on with Tennessee, it feels like sometimes. They create controversy within their own program half the time. And then Florida, how in the world could Florida be 4? And I agree with him. Where did that happen that they became middle of the East when our whole life they've been an elite national program and they made it 5th?
I'll tell you exactly. They might end up 6. That's where they finished last year. But it's exactly what you were talking about all the issues with NIL, right? Boosters and guys getting paid and recruiting, how you got to do it now. I think you talked about ADs quitting. I think Dan Mullen saw that mess. He's like, I don't need this. This is not what I signed up for. I got nothing for it. You guys want to pay me to go sit on the beach? Fine.
Yeah.
And that's where we saw it on the side. I feel like I saw it happen right behind me, right here, right at Williams-Brice last year, where he just kind of hanging out on the sidelines, not doing much.
No.
And it felt like he had given up. I think he was ill that night or something, but there's no excuse. And that to me is a great example of where we are right now. I think DC's not giving the Gamecocks enough credit for what Shane Beamer has done for the public perception more than anything. And that's all this really is. It's a popularity contest at SEC Media Days. That's all it is. It's who do you think? And the media is pretty notorious for not even being close in a lot of ways. Spurrier always used to point that out, and I loved it. But Shane Beamer is likable, and that means something at SEC Media Days. And the Gamecocks are a nice, cute story, I think, in the SEC, too, what they did in year 1 of the Shane Beamer era. Missouri is not a cute story. Nobody really cares about Missouri. Nobody from the media hardly shows up for that thing. I think they're going to be way down there because of that. I think people inherently dislike Florida in a lot of ways from a media perspective because of everything they've been through the years. And Billy Napier is not exactly a really easy to like dynamic personality to begin with. So I think they're going to be down there too. So I do feel like all these factors might work in South Carolina's favor in this preseason poll, which means absolutely nothing. Keep that in mind. I think Kentucky's the opposite of that, Stuart. I think media members feel charitable and they feel good about voting Kentucky higher, and they kind of feel sorry for Mark Stoops maybe in the interim, and I really appreciate like what he's done, making them relevant, even though I agree with you. They haven't won big games by and large. Took them forever to beat Florida just once, where the Gamecocks have done it relatively handily. And everybody knocks the Carolina-Georgia situation. But I saw a stat recently, since 2010, I think Carolina's like 5-7 against Georgia, something like that. It's been really, really competitive if you zoom out a little bit from the post kind of Muschamp era here in the last few years.
Yeah, the Georgia's the one for me. Growing up here as a kid, you always knew what your season was going to be by that Georgia game. It felt like we always played them week 2, which is here we go in week 3, I guess, this year. But even just as a kid, I went to all the, fire ant year in '84 when you really couldn't take yourself serious until you beat Georgia.
Yeah.
And we've beaten Georgia more than even as Gamecock fans we realize, like you just said. And this year, it's going to be up for Coach Beamer and them to keep all that focus in them first 2 games, because Arkansas is on the road. Like you said, 11 a.m. It's going to be a weird environment there. Where are they playing at? They seem to just pick somewhere in Arkansas to play. Are we in Little Rock this year? We're in Fayetteville. Let's go. It's the weirdest thing ever.
Game in the Ozarks just randomly.
Let's throw one in up there. So, but that Georgia is always going to stand out. And as a Gamecock fan, there are 2 teams on that list you hate. You can't stand Georgia and you hate Florida. Florida's just arrogant for now. It seems not even as good of reasons, but maybe it's a good place to start out in the 6th, and everybody will you can lay in the weeds a little bit, sneak up on them. So maybe DC's a genius there, putting us there. And
well, if Shane Beamer had to pick, I think that's exactly where he'd pick, right? I mean,
you have to at this point.
You're looking for these carrots to dangle in front of your team during preseason practice, and also Shane Beamer and Josh Heupel are dealing with raised expectations after really good years, number one, and that goes to their popularity with the fan base. So I think the lower they get picked, the better they would prefer for sure.
Oh, there's no doubt at this point. Now, in 2 or 3 years, he wants to be in that 1-2 position. But yeah, right now, heck yeah. You like that. You can keep your focus on your games. And, hey, nobody, you're Rodney Dangerfield. We get no respect. We're working so hard. Nobody knows. I love all that stuff, too, as a coach. In a few years, yeah, he wants to be, the main speaker at the media days. But right now, I think personally watching him from a distance, I'd have a hard time figuring out what he hasn't handled well. I mean, it really is. As a fan, as a coach, as just a guy that, I watch a lot of that to learn. I just feel like Shane Beamer is really – I don't know if I could have pulled off the video that Hayden showed me the other day.
Right.
Maybe I couldn't have done that. But
you could have done it. You could do it, Stuart. I could see you doing that because you just got to commit to it. That's all you got to do. And I think you could have done it. I mean,
I get enough pyrotechnics. I could pull it off.
Yeah, with your wrestling background, I think you absolutely could have pulled that thing off.
There would have been a shirt getting ripped off in my video.
There you go. As you're talking about that, though, what dawned on me is I think like 99 out of 100 is what you got to give Shane Beamer in a lot of ways for handling things well. The Mike Bobo situation, the offensive coordinator being kind of the exception, the one that I wouldn't say, oh, yeah, full marks at this point. But for all those things that I mentioned, offensive weapons and kind of on paper right now, improving the offensive roster as much as they had with Spencer Rattler leading the way, seems like that might work itself out. I'm wondering from your coaching perspective, is there anything that when you watch, especially these big-time football coaches speak, what sticks out to you? Obviously, you kind of just told us that you feel like Shane Beamer handles everything really well. And from a PR standpoint, I think he's kind of like the new model that a lot of coaches will be looking at and trying to emulate in a lot of ways. What strikes you from some of these press conferences that we probably talk about way too much and overanalyze?
Well, the thing Shane Beamer's got going, you can just tell he paid attention growing up. I mean, really just from listening to obviously his dad, but being around all the other people, he seems like he's kind of taken a little bit of something from everyone. There's still just then when he started coaching, be around Coach Spurrier, who had his certain way with the media and, just kind of paid attention to that. There are guys that, and coaches, period, that when they start talking, you want to listen. He's got that kind of let's hear what he's saying kind of thing to him right now. There are people, Jimbo Fisher started talking at Florida State, where he's just not a guy you enjoy listening to. I mean, it just always seems like woe is me with him, and he's the richest guy on the thing. Like, dude, relax. It was – I go back to my coaching. We said that, Coach Tanner, it was – in 2000, it was easy to come out of nowhere, and he could constantly do it. But from then that point on, we couldn't say we're just little old South Carolina, we're happy to be here. So he had to change his approach with the media that, we expect success, but we're not going to quit working. And that's where I feel like Shane Beamer's been so good is he's enjoying it. I mean, just the last year, the Duke's mayonnaise thing, that showed a lot to me. Of course, the guy didn't want to get a 5-gallon drum of mayonnaise dumped on him. But you know what? He made it fun. He said, hey, it's part of it. I'm getting paid well here. Okay? If this is the worst thing that's going to happen to me is I got to wash my hair 10 times. He just made it so minimal about him and made it, as a Gamecock fan, about us. Hey, we just had fun. We won a bowl game. We get to now, you see the Spencer Rattler. You start seeing these guys come here. As much as you and I talked about money and all this in the beginning, makeup is still going to win these games and talent. And I feel like as a head coach, I feel like he has that word. I feel like he has great makeup. And I don't sit around and watch a lot of stuff. I'm not a Dabo Sweeney press conference guy. I can promise you that. He seems to say something one time so he can argue with himself the next time. So I've just honestly got to the point now that respect him of the success they had, but when he comes on, hey, I'm flipping it over to something else to listen to. I can't listen to that. But Shane Beamer's a guy right now. I still consider myself a young coach. As long as I coach, I feel like you should be learning. I kind of watch him to listen to him and enjoy what he says and what he shows me more than most of these guys show me right now. I honestly believe he loves his players. I think they know that he cares about them. He doesn't make his press conferences about Shane Beamer. He doesn't make them about himself. And he makes it always about the program, the team, and as a fan, that's a big deal. And as a recruit, I would think that's a big deal too, that this guy actually cares about what I'm doing and how we're going to do this.
Well, that's fascinating because you have to what you brought up was ego, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you have to have a certain amount of ego to be a head coach at any level.
Yes.
Be an SEC football coach, man, you have to have maybe a strong sense of self is a better way to put that, right? But then how do you manage that? And that's one of the things that Shane has mentioned. What he learned most in year number 1 is just how much people look at him, how different it is to be the head coach, and how your actions are scrutinized, and how the spotlight's on you. And yet he's still done all of this without making it about himself. I think maybe one of the only ways to do that is to genuinely be that person, and to also have had decades of kind of grooming for that, which is what he's had. And I don't think it necessarily automatically translates to your team playing for the other guy, but it sure has to be an easier sell, doesn't it? When you are that guy, as opposed to others that we've seen. I'll put all the recent Carolina coaches, all 3, Muschamp, Spurrier, and Lou Holtz. Those were all guys that like to be in the spotlight for sure, and didn't come off as guys that just wanted to talk about the team instead. They seem to be kind of the reverse of Shane Beamer. I felt like Brad Scott was always more of a let's look at them instead of me kind of guy.
Yeah, I definitely do. I tell you, Coach, that I've got a few people on the inside that really blew me away is Lane Kiffin. I would have thought he was constantly walking around talking about himself for what we see. And the people that are on the inside there say it's amazing how he loves the players and how they bought in that he actually at practice works his butt off. It's not I'm going to ride around in a golf cart, while my coordinators do it. And that's where you see the success Ole Miss has had in football, I think. I think that, as I said, you and I know it, people who work are still respected. And when your head coach is actively involved, and whatever it is, from your recruiting to you being on the field that day, that's where the success comes in. And that's where we're very fortunate, I think, right now, to have a guy like that. And that's where I think we're going to see our success. If we end up in the 3rd spot or whatever in the SEC, that's where it will have come from. When you believe in the guy that's out there working every day. I've said this to you many a times. I never felt I could outwork Coach Tanner, and we tried. We would try to do more, but he always worked as hard as any of us. And that's why those players 20-some years later still love you. And that's why they still call you coach, is when you worked your butt off as hard as they were, even though you were the leader, and Beamer's got to be the leader. You're going to have to deal with some issues. I don't care how much NIL money you're getting when you break a team rule. Hey, maybe now the fines can be real, right? And now you're making $100,000 millions of dollars. So now when you're late to class, it's, $10,000 goes to the Carolina Children's Home. Let's make those real now.
Right.
Let's get into some real type stuff. But I'll be honest with you, now that our summer baseball is slowing down and it's kind of that cool time, the All-Star game's gone, this is when my seasons mesh together. Postseason baseball and football, there ain't a greater time in the world to follow it. And now, as I'm getting to watch a little more and kind of, as we said, our magazines, I think it can be a fun year for the Gamecocks. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means a New Year's Day bowl or whatever kind of bowl, but I think it's going to be a fun year because I genuinely feel the coaching staff that's there is going to work their butt off of those players.
It's a great way to put it. And also, just because you're a head coach that puts in that work doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a tremendously successful head coach. Monty Lee, the baseball example at Clemson, I know he worked his butt off. Will Muschamp, I know, worked his butt off at South Carolina, but they weren't the proper fits for, whatever reasons. And I think that's the encouraging part about the Shane Beamer future for South Carolina. Now, you got the work part, and it seems to be you got the fit part. I know Nick says, I'm very interested to see how Satterfield's offense does this season. There's a set QB with a lot of talent this year, so no excuses to fall back on. I know Shane stuck his neck out to keep his offensive coordinator the same, to keep continuity there. And now he's delivered some players to him, some weapons, and now you got to see the production for sure. So like you said, man, this football season sets up to be just tremendously interesting for Gamecock fans specifically on so many different levels.
Yeah, how's that old saying goes? It's not always X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes. So, I mean, it's you don't win in the SEC. I'm telling you, that. I've coached in it most of my career. You don't smoke and mirror and win the SEC. You may win a few games. You win in this league having the better players. And then if you can have really the better players and have a good system and good coaches, that's how you win. I mean, it really is. And that's what we're all hoping, that now we feel like we got some of those Jimmies and Joes, and now hopefully we can be this X and O team that puts them in the right place. Because you're right. Don't forget, before that bowl win, everybody wants Satterfield gone. I mean, as a fan base, it was, hey, we need a new coordinator. We need to be exciting. And he stuck with him. And I hope for him that pays off, because I know as a coach, sometimes it's hard to be the only guy that wants to speak up for your coach. But he did it, and now we'll see how it pays off.
Really appreciate you hopping on with us, man. I know it's been a little bit. I know you've been a busy guy, and you fit us in today. And looking forward to seeing what you're going to learn here in the next several weeks as you get the magazine cracked open. And you're gonna. I'm looking forward to a few football nuggets you can point out for us.
Well, I'm excited too. We're going on a few days vacation, so that's when the magazines get in, and you sit around and read them and start getting to watch. But look forward to talking to you a lot more as football leads in. I'm gonna go out, start my acclimation today. Excellent. Sit out in the heat, may even just stay out there for about 4 hours.
Yeah.
So, I hope Jan Bennett, I know he's always paying attention. Time for him to get himself back out in the sun. I know he likes to stay in the shade a lot during baseball this year. So we need to get our fans getting ready for those noon games.
Off-season conditioning program, man.
Yes.
If you haven't started it by July 22nd, you got to get it going for sure.
You're behind already if you haven't. I started weeks ago with this, so hopefully I can just keep building up. Me and you will be ready to go when it all comes around.
A lot of 12-ounce curls out there for sure. Well done. Stuart Lake, ladies and gentlemen, former Gamecock assistant baseball coach, Charleston Southern head coach, Ole Miss assistant coach, still celebrating a national championship with that program. Always great to hear from him, and love that he's a Cleveland Browns fan, representing the Browns today with the hat. All kinds of takes all over the place. Wanted to also mention to you guys as we near wrapping up here, I want to give you one final word on remembering Phil Petty, which has kind of been the theme today. But before we do that, I need to tell you about one of our sponsors here on the program. So tremendously thankful to have Freedom Primary as a primary sponsor here on the show. You should give them a call at 803-627-2447 if this sounds good to you. What Freedom Primary Care offers is a comprehensive primary health care place, one location, affordable memberships, but they will offer you not just the traditional path to care, but also some, if you're more natural minded, they will go that way with you. They're very, I think, nimble. That's the word that what the SEC is using these days. I think that's exactly how you can describe Freedom Primary Care. It's where I trust to take care of my family right now in what is a world that's all over the place in so many ways, and healthcare specifically with the recent news of the President of the United States and everything that's gone on. Freedom Primary Care values your freedom, responsible to you, not for you. It's what I value most about what Freedom Primary Care offers. Again, their phone number, 803-627-2447. They're located right now in Fort Mill, South Carolina, up near where I live. If you do not live in the area, they have telemedicine options as well. Give them a call again, 803-627-2447. That's Freedom Primary Care. The primary focus on today's show, trying to honor the memory of one of the best Gamecock quarterbacks in history, and certainly a very special one to a lot of people out there in Phil Petty, who passed away at the age of 43. Again, my personal interaction was with him 1997 in an elevator at the Roost where he's got a whole pizza and he was headed up. It was towards the end of the night. I think we were all headed to the rooms and he was trying to gain weight as a redshirt freshman and ended up a tremendous career that saw him help Gamecock football get turned around from the worst in the SEC to one of the biggest turnarounds in college football history, winning a couple Outback Bowls in that 2001 season specifically. Wins against Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State in the same season. Is what South Carolina football did with Phil Petty leading the way. Would like to give Eric Kimry the final word here. 5 tweets that I think honor a guy that he backed up in the most appropriate way. Phil Petty will be missed. He was a competitor and leader, intelligent, thoughtful, gritty as heck, and our QB1, Eric Kimry says on Twitter. Though he's no longer here, his spirit lives, and his legacy will remain steadfast at the University of South Carolina. He continues. Phil took the beating of a 21-game losing streak, got off the ground, wiped the mud off his hands and the grass out of his face mask, led us to the 2 most successful seasons in school history at that time. If anyone has embodied the spirit of a Gamecock, it was him. Phil Petty beat Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State twice. He loved football, had a great understanding of the game, made everyone in the huddle believe we could win. He made us all better. Most importantly, Phil was a husband and a father and a loving son. He was kind to strangers and loved talking ball with Gamecock fans. He was so proud of his kids, sending us videos of his son throwing a ball an awful lot like his dad. Eric Kimry concludes talking about Phil Petty by saying, for us who got the privilege to play with him, he was our brother. We shared a brotherhood that never went away, never will. Love you, 14. I'll always be your backup forever to thee. Phil Petty. Hope we did some kind of justice to him and his memory today, especially for those who valued him so much and everything he was as a Gamecock football player. Thank you for listening to the program. Thank you for your contributions to the show. That'll do it for the July 22nd edition of Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent.